Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Jim Lauderdale. He's going to share a story about meeting Bob Dylan.
The first time I was in close proximity to Bob Dylan, I'm fuzzy about what year it was, but it was in the early 80s. It was probably about 83 or 4. And I had lived in New York City. I moved up there in 1979. I'd been in Nashville for 5 months and was primarily wanting to hang out with George Jones and Roland White, who I was a big fan of the Kentucky Colonels and Clarence White and Roland's and Clarence's singing together. And I was too chicken to hang out with George. My roommates played with Wilma Lee Cooper, who was an Opry member, and so I'd go every weekend to the Opry. And but Roland was very kind and hung out with him a lot. We recorded an album that didn't come out for 33 years. But anyway, I was had been living in New York, and then I was leaving for several months at a time to do this play called Cotton Patch Gospel, where I played the banjo and sang. Was one of the band members. I was going to be in New York, and I got a call to see if I could put together a band to open up for Rick Danko and Levon Helm at this place called the Lone Star Café, which was this great club. It wasn't set up really to be a music venue, but it was, and it was like this place that attracted all of these out of town. It was kind of a country bar, but they'd have anybody from James Brown to Dr. John and all sorts of folks. And I was living in a building that Doc Pomus, the great songwriter, lived in. And he would go there. He had a table there, and he would go there every night and have chili and just sit there and watch music for a while. But I'd gotten this call, so I called some of my friends who were bluegrass players. They wanted a bluegrass band. And after our kind of get-together run-through of these various guys who hadn't played together, but, bluegrass has this, it's kind of like a musical language in a way. It's got these standards. It's like Roll Under My Sweet Baby's Arms, the key of G, and everybody will know it, these classics. And so we had our run through, and we didn't have much time, a quick sound check. And then as I got off the stage and was walking towards this revolving door, which was the front door, in walks Bob Dylan with that fur. Well, with that, he would wear this kind of fur cap for a while, winter cap. And so I saw him, and I just tried to act cool. And he said, "You seen Levon?" And I said, yes, I believe Levon is upstairs in the dressing room. Yes, excuse me, come in. And so he sat. The bar was probably 10 feet from the stage, and people would stand in front of that, and there was a balcony. And so he sat at the bar for both shows, or 2 shows. And on the last show of Levon and Rick's, he sat in with them, and they did like some country thing, Hank Senior songs and stuff like that. So that was really cool. And then that night was probably the highlight of my musical career, to be that close. And I don't know, I'm sure he probably wouldn't remember this bluegrass band or anything like that. But just being in front of that kind of thing of like, am I just going to totally fold up here because here's one of the all-time greats, period, or, get through it, put on do the best you can and whatever, even though it was a thrown together band, but they were really good players. And then I was lucky enough several years later to play at this Montreux Jazz Festival and in Switzerland. And so one night backstage, they were having this blues night, and in comes Bucky Baxter, who used to live here, and sadly Bucky passed away a few years ago. And at the time, he was playing pedal steel with Bob Dylan, and so Bucky and I had recorded together and knew him, and we were friends. And he said, "Yeah, we're playing this rock festival tomorrow night. You should come up. You can ride up with us." And Bucky was around that time was very kindly saying, "Listen, and I was living in Los Angeles by this time, and he said, come to our shows. Sometimes Bob doesn't decide the opening act till that day. And so come, and maybe you can meet him or hang around. His manager will be around." So I did that for several nights in LA. But he, usually after a show, Bob would just kind of walk out, with a sweatshirt or with a hood on and get let out, not talk to folks. And so this festival, I thought, okay, this is it. This was another one of these times that's kind of embarrassing, but you think, this is my big break. This is going to happen. And so Bucky, I rode in this bus with them up to this festival, but Bob Dylan traveled separately. And there was this kind of dressing room trailer, and Bucky said, "Yeah, now the office is right next door. The production office of his traveling crew, is right next door. And so they're going to have a meeting or whatever, but Bob might be walking through there, just so you know." And so I had my guitar with me, and I started just belting out this blues song I'd been working on, and then the door opens, and then this woman from the office said, "Excuse me, can you please keep it down? We're having a meeting in there, okay?" I was like, "Yeah, sorry." But then at dinner, at catering in this big tent, I was sitting there with some of the band, and Bob came and sat down next to me, and I just, and he was asking me a question about Quincy Jones, who would kind of curate this Montreux Jazz Festival. And so I just, said a few things, but did not, that was it. I didn't want to intrude on his privacy, but I've seen him tons of times, and he's, huge fan.
There's so much to learn from somebody like Bob just by observing, and even if the things that we learn aren't realities in his world, there's things that we can put together ourselves.
Exactly. And I was just thinking of this as you were saying that, is I think when you're around greatness like that, I think all of a sudden I'm getting this kind of thought that it kind of unlocks something in your brain. You know what I mean? Because it's such a jolt in a way to be around. But I think as people, we project a lot of things anyway onto other people. And I think that just being in the company of greatness, I think your brain kind of goes through a lot of changes suddenly, and then you let this osmosis kind of happen and pick up things. When I used to play banjo, when I was in high school, I was hanging out one day with this guy named Jimmy English, really great banjo player. And he said, hey, let me give you a tip. Always hang out, always play with guys that are better than you, because that is really true. I got another good lesson when I was jamming with this guy. I used to because I didn't play guitar for a while, I was jamming with this guy who was a composition major, and he was playing guitar and just, kind of riffing on some stuff. Then all of a sudden he stopped and he said, hey, it's like you're playing like you're just kind of like noodling and playing nonstop. It's like you have to learn how to listen. Find out when you come in, and then, lay back. And I was, embarrassed when he said that, but that was such a good lesson, but that is true, to hang out and as I mentioned earlier, I wish that I hadn't been so intimidated inside of myself, not because of some of these other people, but just to have had been able to be relaxed enough to go hang out with these people more.